I'm really pleased to be joined on Not the Andrew Marr Show by Ashish Prashar, who is a leading political strategist who is working on this amazing, innovative campaign called No Tax for Genocide. And how are you doing, Ashish?
Thanks for having me. I'm doing great.
Well, look, I'm just going to show the homepage of the website here, which kind of illustrates exactly what the situation is. We've got these leaders of both parties who are totally ignoring what's happening on the ground. Over 70% of the population are opposed to what's happening in genocide in Gaza, the genocide there, and also the fact that we are supporting Israel. At the homepage it says the UK is actively enabling a genocide in Gaza and you can stop it. Now, lots of people go out on protests every week or two to make that point. Why have you thought that this was necessary?
Well, look, I think it's important to set the scene a little bit on this. Like, yes, everyone's been protesting every week since this has begun. There's been huge protests across Europe, Britain, America. Our politicians haven't listened, right? It's fair to say that it's not just the global South or the Middle East that is against this genocide of Palestinians, but it's literally the people of the West. Our institutions don't represent us. And the reason this campaign is important is it's only possible because it is a genocide. And I'm going to give you a couple of numbers here that make this possible. 34,000 civilians killed and 1.2 million people forcibly removed. Those numbers might sound eerily familiar at first glance to anyone watching this, but they're not Gaza. That was the Bosnian genocide, and that happened over a longer period than what we're seeing happen in Gaza today. Today, we've got over 40,000 dead, 15,000 of them children, 75,000 plus injured, people trapped under the rubble that we don't know about, and over 2 million people displaced. Israel has bombed, starved Palestinians, and the US and the UK have aided and abetted in those war crimes. The ICJ have ruled this a plausible genocide. Francesca Albanese, the UN Special Rapporteur for Human Rights, confirmed only 2 days ago that this is a genocide. The only people not calling it a genocide are the US and in turn the UK. I'm still waiting to see a UK specialist on genocide or from the Foreign Office who actually understands that comes out and actually puts their name to a report saying it's not a genocide. The State Department and the Foreign Office are simply not reputable sources on this, particularly for the fact that they've lied over the last 6 months about what's happening on the ground. And what keeps happening is more and more evidence comes from the UN, human rights orgs, survivors of previous genocides, including Bosnia and Rwanda, who've called this a genocide. And the reason that's important is the public can only do what we're campaigning for legally because genocide and the ruling of it being a genocide make it possible.
Now it says on the web page that it's a criminal offence in this country to pay tax if any of it is used to fund genocide, murder, or any criminal activity, as per the 1945 UN Charter, Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court, Terrorism Act 2000, and the Nuremberg Code. Now that's quite a lot of legal stuff to justify this campaign. To withhold tax from the HMRC or the council or councils in order to stop the genocide. Now, can you sort of explain how it works? Because, I mean, if I wanted to withhold tax on my own and said that to the HMRC for this reason, it probably wouldn't work because I'd be on my own saying this. There have been people in the past, I think one of the people who work on your campaign did a similar thing on their own where they said they wouldn't pay tax, they were withholding tax, but they were not taken seriously. Do you think the point of this is that the number of people, if you have 100,000, which is the amount of people you're hoping for, that will be taken seriously by the HMRC? They can't just ignore that if you're saying we're withholding because of the genocide.
That's a really good question. So I will answer it in a couple of bits. So you are actually committing a crime when you're paying tax if it's funding a genocide. If it's aiding and abetting and facilitating it, you're culpable. Frankly, even businesses are culpable under the statutes. And to simplify this for everyone, see, my mentor, Nora Erakat, would say The law is power and can be used on behalf of emancipatory struggles and can be wielded in the service of political movements and liberation. And she's a very famous Palestinian human rights lawyer in the United States. So we've used the law that they wrote, the law that the global north has put together to show that it is illegal to continue to fund this, right? And the UK specifically has a couple of laws. So this campaign, as you mentioned, launched on March 14th, and it's based on UK statute law, really, even beyond the fact that we are signatories to the Rome Statute, and there's the Nuremberg Code. The ICC Act, specifically, that the UK passed in 2001, makes it a criminal offence for anyone in the UK or person to engage in war crimes, crimes against humanity, genocide, to conduct any crimes ancillary to those crimes. The Terrorism Act of 2000 does not exclude taxation in its criminalization of funding of terror and mass atrocities. And how do we do this? Well, people still have to pay their tax. You know, you're only withholding them. You basically have to set up a conditional revocable trust, basically another bank account. And you put the money in there, and the primary beneficiary of that would be the government, right? They get it. And how they get it in the end is if they prove they're not aiding and abetting in this genocide. So all we're doing is withholding that money until a time that they are no longer participating in it, no longer complicit in it, no longer aiding it. And that way it would be released to them. The secondary beneficiary is you, but I imagine the government would want to show that it's not aiding and abetting in this very quickly so they don't have that money held back. Now, you as an individual can do this under these statutes right now. It's not about, yes, will the HMRC say, oh, you can't, there's no measure to withhold tax. Yes, but they can't really demand it because this isn't just tax law. This is criminal law. This is war law. And this is human rights law that allows you to withhold it. They wrote those laws to ensure that people couldn't fund mass atrocities, that couldn't fund war crimes, couldn't fund genocide. I guess they never thought it would be applied to them as a government institution. And the reason we want more numbers is we want this to stop. This isn't about just protection of the individuals taking part in this. You know, the reality is that I want, and many people in the UK, you said 70%, I reckon it's even higher than that would just want it to stop, whether they're the side of Palestine or not. They want to not wake up and see kids being blown to bits by our weapons and being supported by our politicians at the UN and everything else. They want to see an end to this. And that's why we want numbers, because we want to show that we want to wield some muscle to get the government to actually stop. Are you vulnerable as an individual doing this? Well, we're going to make sure you're not by having hundreds of thousands of people sign up to this. And we've already had tens of thousands of people sign up immediately once we launch this. And we're hoping to get 100,000 very soon.
Right. I mean, the website's very easy to read and simple to follow. I mean, this is the graphics line. We only ask you to pledge today. On the day of action, once we hit 100,000 pledges, we will email you to come back here and follow these simple steps below. Step 1, based on your circumstances, you will enter some basic information to generate an auto-filled cover letter and trust deed document. So that trust deed document, this is this here. It's quite a long legal form. Is that very important that people fill in that form in that way?
We'll generate it for you and fill it in with the details you provide. But yes, we'll do all that paperwork for you because I know how hard. Also, that's important for people. I know like every barrier to entry we're trying to remove for individuals. So there's no confusion. So there's no, I don't understand this clause. We'll do all of that work for you. And yes, it's important because those documents will be sent off to HMRC to show you're withholding that. And the types of things you can withhold right now. If you're a freelancer, this is pretty easy for you, right? You already have to pay your tax probably once a year, maybe even quarterly. So you can withhold. Right, and you inform HMRC to do this. If you are a contractor, you can probably do the same. If you are, you know, this obviously easy to impact council tax, right? You're in control of that. The one thing that we haven't got is individuals doing payee right now, right? Businesses themselves have to withhold. And the test case we did with this was a small business in Northern England, has about 50 to 60 employees who informed with all the laws that I've outlined, has written a letter, has the deed, informed HMRC at the beginning of March that they're withholding their taxes until the circumstances change in Gaza, until the UK government proves that is not not aiding and abetting a genocide anymore. They are not willing to be complicit. They're not willing. Their staff don't want to do this. They even took a vote with their staff, and it was overwhelming, from what I understand. Right? It was nearly like only 2 or 3 people, and they obviously don't name who didn't say yes, but everybody else was on board. Right? And that shows you the strength of will of our public right now, who all want to just do more than just walk in the streets and protest, because we know they're not listening. So they informed the government that they're withholding. They got a letter back from HMRC, which I'm happy to share with you. Basically, the HMRC said there's no mechanism to withhold tax traditionally. And then they went into some waffle that said, you know, you can't tell where it's going. It funds our education. It funds our healthcare. And you can have your voice at the next election if you disagree with the government of the day. Now, as someone who's worked in the UK government, I know when a business says they're withholding their tax, they're pretty blunt about saying you have to pay your tax. The wording isn't that innocuous, if that makes sense. So they left it open, and the business has not been paying its tax all month, and nobody has come from them right now. And look, does that mean circumstances of our government as they see more and more people do this? Now, some people, while they're waiting for our 100,000 pledge number to start activating this, some people have decided to see what we've done and gone on and done this by themselves. I've had people email me saying, I've already done it. Like, I've had businesses who say, how do I do this quicker? You know, people who are like really enraged that what we're doing is massacring human beings that could be our children, frankly. And they are already doing this. And the HMRC has had no solid response and no demand for the tax. And we all know how demanding HMRC is when you decide you're going to not put your dollars, your pounds in this case, in the treasury.
Right, and so that deed document's been checked over by lawyers and is all kind of watertight then?
Yeah, it's watertight. We've worked with international criminal lawyers, and we've worked with domestic lawyers in the UK too. But the reason we did both is because, like I said, it's not a tax expert that's... No, look, here's the thing I'd say to you. Your accountant isn't going to tell you to withhold your tax. Your accountant's job is to protect you. Like, no tax lawyer is going to immediately go, hey, Crispin, you should do this. You know, their job is to do right by you, and they're doing their job by saying, pay your tax, please. But criminal lawyers, human rights lawyers, they know that this is legally possible, right? They understand that part of the law. The tax lawyers in their box don't really understand, because they're so limited with their imagination. They're not using the law for emancipatory purposes. They're not using it against the institutions that they work for, frankly. They're not using it to go, oh, wait, hold on, this could apply to us. And to give you an example of how this law could be used abroad right now, let's just say a random terror organization blows up something in Europe, right? And it was funded by a different country. But it's not, let's, pick a random Middle Eastern country that we've decided to call enemies over the last 50, 60 years. We would then sanction those countries, but not just sanction those countries for that individual act that this organization did, that even though it has no real connection, but we know, we claim we know they funded that act. And we would sanction the people of those countries. Even though they had nothing to do with their maybe government's decision, they funded it through their taxation. And that is how these laws are now being applied on us. And they didn't write that for us, but we're going to use it against them.
Now, look, I mean, just thinking about this, the fact that you'd get 100,000 people to sign up for it is strength in numbers.
Yeah.
But, lots of people are being arrested for doing nothing wrong at all in protest. I mean, 2 weeks ago, we had someone who watches the show, was three people were arrested for hissing in a council meeting. And they were kept in a police cell for 24 hours. The fact that there's the kind of line between legality and illegality is blurred by politicians at the moment anyway. They're trying to intimidate anyone who speaks out about Palestine and Gaza. They would surely try to make an example of 1 or 2 people who would withhold tax in order that everyone else would be scared to do so. That would be, or they change some law in order to make that happen. Do you not see that happening as inevitable?
100%. So anyone who does this through what we're doing, if someone does this by themselves, please reach out. But if anybody's doing this, when we do the action, we'll have our backing and have legal representation, right? That is one thing I want people to know. We have a fund, we're putting stuff together, we will back the people they go after. right? There's no way we're not going to let them go alone into this battle, because they will do everything they can to scare everyone, right? To your point, they held those people for 24 hours. They didn't have any real legal basis, but it's the fear of jail, it's the fear of prosecution, it's the fear of punishment. But I always go, like, I look at those streets when everyone keeps saying, I am Palestinian. Everyone keeps saying, I am Palestinian. What does that mean to you? I ask your viewers right now. I read this beautiful piece by Mohammed Al-Kurd, who spoke recently, who's a friend. He's based in New York. He came to London to speak. He wrote this piece about, what does that really mean? What are you putting on the line for Palestinians? What are you putting on the line? Now, we'll help you, yes. But also, like, that fear, you need to lose some of it right now. I'm not, because they're not legally sound. What they're going to come up with you is not legally sound, but they will come. I'm not going to pretend that, you know, they've changed laws about protests, I understand, in the UK. They've changed lots of freedom of speech laws. That's not obviously happened here. I'm really blessed that we have the freedom of speech and the freedom of mobilization, because the US actually, weirdly, it's enshrined in our constitution. And that protects really bad people too. I'm not going to pretend it's good when Nazis march in, you know, parts of the US that are uncomfortable for people of color like myself. But in this case, they can't stop us protesting. They can't stop us heckling the president. They can't stop us going to his event. Even last night in New York, colleagues of mine and other people in this movement raided the president's fundraiser and like shouted him through all night, like disrupted it. But Obama, Clinton, and Biden were there. It was disrupted on the street and inside the hall. We can do that because our constitution enshrines it. And I understand you don't have the same sad rights in the United Kingdom. But what does it mean to say, I am Palestinian and we are Palestinian? What are you putting on the line? Because whatever we go through, we're not losing entire members of our family. We're not getting erased from this earth. Our child is not losing their limbs. Our grandparents aren't being taken away from us. Our parents aren't being taken away from us. And these are the things that, if you actually care about Palestinians, that may be arrest that doesn't have any constitutional standing, being in a prison cell for a night. Is it that hard? Is it that hard? And we will back you. I will go back to that. We will back you. But the point I'm making here is, what are you willing to put on the line? There are a lot of people who are leading these marches who are saying they're Palestinian. I'm not talking about the people on the ground, because I believe everyone marching is with Palestine and with Palestinians and will do things for them. But I think some of those leaders wouldn't. They organize the marches. They think they feel good about themselves. But what have they done? What have they put on the line to help our kin, our brothers and sisters in Gaza right now? What are they doing to resist our government's complicity and aiding and abetting of the massacre of children?
I think it's kind of inevitable, as we've just been saying, that people will be tried to make an example of. The fear will be used to stop people doing anything. However, what you also make a very good point on is that the protests are good because they keep us together, and we keep fighting and showing people in Gaza and Palestine in general that we support them. However, in the number of months that we've been doing this, nothing has really changed. And I can see that we need a more radical approach to what's happening. And this is what you're offering, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, the reality is they're just not listening. And, you know, you have two ways in Britain this year to hold them accountable. You have the election, and I know it's not a great choice. So maybe there's independent candidates coming up that you can all vote for. But the second thing is this campaign. You know, this will affect whoever the administration is in whenever the election is. I think it's going to be potentially October, November, right? So, like, this will impact, if it's Labour, like, you can make sure that this administration and the next does not continue these genocidal acts. And to answer your question about will they change the laws, maybe, but this will be taking place before they change the laws. And this will be also, they'll probably be waiting for rulings from international courts and everything else. And here's the other thing I would like to say about will they not listen to what that ruling is? What's really consistent, what I'm seeing across legal, I'd say even like allies of Israel, governmentally, at least, not like by population, is they've all followed the ICJ. The Netherlands demanded, the courts said there's a genocide taking place. We follow the ICJ's plausible genocide. We ask you not to send, they ordered their government not to send any more weapon parts to Israel. The United States, where I'm working on these cases with, again, Nora Erakat and other Palestinian leaders here, we did the case through the CCR, the Center of Constitutional Rights, to take Biden, Blinken, and Austin to court. And we're appealing the decision right now, but it was dismissed. But the judge wrote in his opinion, he believes there is a genocide taking place. And the reason he didn't take the case on is he believes in separation of powers and that Congress should hold the president accountable for these actions. Now, that's a powers issue, not his belief. He's a Biden-appointed federal judge saying it's a genocide, and he advises the White House and the administration to send no more weapons. So you're not seeing top courts rule against this, right? And it would be a stretch, and it would be really out of sync for any UK top court to not call it a genocide right now, while the ICJ is still calling it one, going to do its final ruling, and other top courts who are allies, America included, that are saying, their leading judges are saying, oh, it's a genocide.
Yeah. I mean, I think you've done a very good job of covering the fears that people might have of getting involved in this campaign, and the point of doing it is that they're not listening, and we need to be more radical, and this is a way to do that, and it would make a difference. But the other thing about this campaign that I've noticed, because I get emails and people send me links and stuff, is there's criticisms of personal type against you and others on the campaign in order to undermine it, and to sort of show, who are these people doing this campaign? Can we trust them? This is a quite common thing to happen on what we call the left, where we're saying, who are these upstarts coming in saying that we should do this? Why aren't they people we've already heard of who are doing campaigns? So you know, your background, if we just go straight into your background. I mean, one of the things people are saying is you worked for Boris Johnson, I think you worked for Blair, and you worked for Biden, and as you say, you're a political strategist. So that was your occupation. That is your occupation. I'm someone who thinks that everyone can change their mind, and that doesn't mean, you know, that you shouldn't be branded for life for having worked for someone that people don't approve of. What's your comeback on those sort of attacks on you personally, that you work for these people?
I mean, don't you want to stop this genocide? Does it really matter who you work with? I mean, I can happily go through my career and talk about why I got to where I got to in a second, but I want to go back to one thing. Like, does it matter? I want to tell you about a coalition here in the United States, led by Nora Erakat. I'm her close advisor. She's the face of this movement in the United States. Face of this movement probably globally, actually, as a young Palestinian leader, right? Not anyone in the UK. I don't see any of them being the face of this. And she has got advice from former State Department. They're people who've actually helped this genocide, but they've resigned to work on this. I have famously Josh Paul, who resigned at the beginning of this, was the weapons transfer expert for the State Department. You could argue he's a war criminal, but he's on our team. He's leading massive campaigns here because he knows the law inside out. He knows how to break the institution from the inside, and he's doing that work. We have people who are Black leaders, white leaders, all this stuff, who come across from all sides, who are working together to try and do everything they can to stop this. Because it doesn't really matter where you come from. If your goal is the liberation of Palestinian people, the prevention of this genocide. And I want to go back to, I've dedicated my life's work writing injustices for oppressed people, all oppressed people, whether that be victims of mass incarceration or Palestinians. And I will continue to do that till my last breath. Because Mahmoud Darwish wrote that, you know, if you live free, or die like the tree standing up. I haven't got time. None of us should have time to waste around petty decisions people have made in their career, in their life, to get where they had to get to, or decisions they know nothing about, or the background they know nothing about. You know, I advocate for Palestinians because they are my family. They are my friends. They're my kin. Because I had the opportunity to go to the Middle East with Tony Blair and see apartheid, segregation, oppression firsthand of the people I love. And when you see it, you can't unsee it. And there was no way to come back from that and work for those very oppressive institutions of which I left. So let's stay focused on Palestine, Palestinians, and let's make sure we stop this ongoing genocide, end the occupation, end apartheid, and free Palestine from the river to the sea, because our resistance collectively is the sunshine that will overpower these political figures right now. And to address those things about who I've worked for, I was incarcerated as a 17-year-old in the United Kingdom for theft, a minor act, right? I was sentenced to a year for theft in the United Kingdom. It's publicly known. You know, I've written many things about it. I've done 2 TED Talks about it. When I got out of prison, and by the way, that was under the Blair administration in 2000, 2001. So when I was finally let out, my family fought to get me out of prison, right? They made sure that sentence was reduced to 4 months. They fought the justice system. Then Home Secretary Jack Straw, my aunt, wrote to him every day, did what that colleague of yours did. Basically wrote, instead of saying free Palestine all night till they couldn't take it anymore, she wrote every day till he couldn't take it anymore, and my sentence was reduced. But when I got out, my opportunities are as limited as any other person with a record. In the UK, we don't seal your records, whether they're young offenders records or not. Do you know who gave me my first shot? At 20 years old, a couple of years later, News Corp. I applied to every progressive company. I applied to the Labour Party. You have a criminal record. News Corp gave me my first job. From then, one editor of News Corp famously took me to go work for the Conservative Party. And I followed him because he was my sponsor. He was the reason I didn't have to talk about my criminal record. For nearly a decade, he allowed me cover. So I went where he went. And I'm not saying the people I worked for in the UK are good. They're not. Like, I made my bed with them and left. I left on my own terms. I even burnt them, and you'll appreciate this, with the tools they taught me. I wrote a story in the New Statesman about how they're all racist bastards, and you shouldn't vote for them. And guess what? The country still voted for them in 2010. I don't even know why I wrote it in the end, because no one listened. You know, y'all voted for the people I said weren't good, and I was inside, and I'm telling you, they're not good. And, you know, I came out here, I worked for then Senator Barack Obama running for an election in 2008, which was life-changing. And I don't believe any one of those progressive people who might hate this in 2008 were thinking Obama was a war criminal. They thought this guy who was black, who was like generational change for them, was supporting him. And yes, that meant I worked for VP Biden, you know, and I don't regret those decisions. I don't regret my life. Because
so what have you...
I just want to answer that. Just want to answer. The reason I took those things was so I could fight oppression. So I could build up my own credibility to fight oppression. You only get to do that, unfortunately, in our world with credibility, right? You only get to do that with who you've worked for, what you've done. I've built justice reform programs that have decarcerated prisons in the United States. I have second chance hiring programs that formerly incarcerate Black and brown brothers. I don't see people in the Stop the War movement stopping a war for the last decade, but this movement today will stop this war. I don't see people who've been like organizing things that they've pretended they care about other people in other countries, from Syria to Iraq and anything, having stopped anything. But this campaign will stop it, because we can defund the government. If we can withhold our money, it doesn't matter who brought that together. If it's whether ex-State Department officials, former ICC prosecutors I work with, former international human rights lawyer, well more credible than Keir Starmer that I work with, that brought this together. Some who sit on the right on this because they're not, but they don't believe in the mass massacre. They don't believe in the massacre of Palestinians, and they believe in the right to resist in law. That is a coalition of people I want to be with, not people who moan about other people on the sidelines and have done nothing, absolutely nothing to stop this.
Now, look, I need to ask you more about your journey, because I think it's fascinating. You've met some of these people, you've worked for some of these people. You're still young. I mean, you look young. I don't know, maybe you take the right vitamins. I don't know. But what have you learned from those experiences of working for those people? Do you feel that the political class is not doing its job? I mean, you've obviously not working for them anymore. I mean, what led you to come out of that? and start doing this?
Well, so I've been doing Palestine work since about 2012, and I actually wrote, you're gonna laugh, I wrote a paper on it for the Conservative Party when I worked for them, like advocating the establishment of a single state at one point, of like for all people to deal with. So, and I wrote that in 2007, 2008. Andrew Mitchell, I submitted it to, and I'm sure they didn't listen clearly, but it's something I've cared about for a long time. But what I learned from them is how to use the institutions and the law in my favor, and what I've learned from them is how to wield that power against them in other ways, whether it's through the media, whether it's through their actual laws. Because a lot of the laws they've written over the last century were never thought to be applicable to them, right? They never thought movements would be able to use that power against them. And I've learned a lot about that. I've learned also how they operate and what they care about, the timelines. They will keep pushing their narrative until they wear out. Like some of the best, look, I hate to say it, right? And the left are going to hate me for saying it, but the right is better at you than campaigning. And because they stick to their message and they know what they believe in. Well, we are an amalgamation, a bigger coalition of people on the left. And we have to address everybody's concerns, fine. But we can't seem to get it together to figure out how to get rid of them. Like, they just stick true to their guns. And we need to figure out ways to do that better and learn how to do that better. And that's what we do. And I've tried that out in the justice space, especially in the United States, which, as you know, has a mass incarceration problem. I've brought coalitions of the right and left together to care about this issue as a right of freedom, as a right of, oppression. And like, I'll give you an example of one of the things we did. We wrote a bill called Clean Slate here. It gets rid of people's records permanently after they've served time. Because, most Americans did not know that the record was holding people back from getting jobs, from getting housing here, actually, and getting rental agreements. You couldn't even rent a house if you have a record in some states, right? But most Americans didn't know that. Most Americans, even on the right, didn't know that. They thought your journey ended at prison and you should get yourself back on your feet. Once we educated people about that, these laws have been passing in their droves in red states and blue, in Utah and Florida and places like that, which are red as they come, have passed laws to seal records and give people a second chance, right? Blue states like New York have done it. We bring coalitions together. That's how you use the knowledge that I've built over those years. One of my biggest sponsors of the Clean Slate bill in New York, and I want to go off topic too much, was JP Morgan. Because you know what we told JP Morgan? There's an opportunity here. These people are unbanked. They can't get bank accounts with a record.
Right.
JP Morgan were like, we both believe in this and we think people should have a second chance, because they started to employ people with records. And they ended up helping them set up their first bank accounts. You've got to bring people together for liberation.
What's your, I mean, the left and right thing, I mean, that's something that you don't seem to follow, really. You don't, or it's not something that you cling to. You don't sort of, you don't even think about these are left people and these are right people. You just look for who's on the same page on a particular thing.
I believe most people want the same thing. I'd go as far as 70, 80, 80% of people want the same thing. A lot of those people vote ways that I would never vote. A lot of those people support people I won't support. I don't have a party here anymore because my president is committing a genocide. So I can't even vote for the Democrats. I'll vote down the ballot for candidates I love in my city and my state, but I can't vote for him. He's like massacring people I call my kin, who I actually have extended family. I'm not going to vote for him, but the reality, I'm homeless, right? But I don't think we can't work together across the aisle on lots of things, because I don't really believe in that, because I do believe the public is not our parties. I do believe the public aren't the people you see on TV every day going, we don't like immigrants, or we don't like boats in the UK, or like blah, blah, blah. And then the other side saying we need to be kinder. But most of the public agree on the same issues. Most of the public aren't as radical as those people we're seeing on TV talking about those issues. Most of the public want the same things. Most of the public are good people. Most of the public are human beings and want to see nobody oppressed, nobody going through massacres, nobody locked up with no life opportunities again, nobody, and everybody getting a fair shot in life, right? That is what the most of the public are. Most of the public, I'm sure in the UK, want the NHS to work. Most of the public want free education up to a certain point. I'm sure everybody is pretty close on a lot of issues. And we've done a really, I think it's also deliberate and by design by the institutions to create voting blocks where they can guarantee these votes, radicalize people on both sides, but never actually change anything for anyone. Never actually make anything better for anyone. To them, it's a game, it's a sport, it's a team sport. Unfortunately, too many people in the public have bought into that. I just want liberation. I want no people in prison in the United States. Nobody. And I know that's a question for another podcast about what does that mean with violent crime and everything else, right? I don't want that. Prison doesn't work. I was tortured in prison. Does not work, right? Prison has never helped anyone, right? I don't want Palestinians slaughtered. I want them to have their land back. I want there to be their land. I want it to be their land. And I'm a one-state person for everybody, Jewish, Christian, and Muslim. Like, I don't think you can argue that this is working right now. There are lots of things. I want freedom for people in like the Congo. I don't want them mining our phones for iPhones. These are the things we've got to fight for. And most the public believe in the same things. What's happening is our political class is tying onto a few issues and they're goading us into these things. And too many people, and I'd say more people on the left on this, get stuck on what you done, who you worked for, blah, blah, blah. If you've not been whiter than white, you know, cleaner than clean, you can't be part of this thing. You're not perfect. Well, also, by the way, can I say, most of the people who've been oppressed are not perfect. Most of them have been in prisons. Would those people on the left, and I don't know any of the names in the UK, you'll have to forgive me. Would they have worked with Black Panthers because they got locked up in jail? Some of them killed cops. But would they be too dangerous for them? They didn't do things right. Would they have worked with those real revolutionaries, real people who'd be on the side of Palestinians right now and putting their neck on the line? Would they have worked with those people because they haven't been perfect? You know, because they weren't rich kids starting a thing and like, and I mean this actually without trying to be overly derogatory. Some of the people who start the Stop the War thing are like really, really well off in the UK. I think of Andrew Murray and people like that, right? Like they got money. You know, it's easy for them to say they were righteous and progressive all their life. When all of us have had to get jobs, work, grew up poor, made decisions that are not good for us, all that stuff, there's so many things that affect our life, that get on our journey. The fact is I'm here today in my 40s, right? And all I give a damn about is the liberation of my people and people I love. And that shouldn't matter what I did before that.